My name is Tessa Langford, and I didn't realize my mother-in-law was buying my marriage apart until I saw the payment. Not a metaphorical payment, not emotional labor, an actual transaction. It started the way these stories always start, small enough to ignore, polite enough to excuse. My husband, Caleb, was a good man when we met. Not perfect, but honest. He wasn't flashy or dominant. He was steady. The kind of man who remembered your coffee order and filled your gas tank without being asked. I married him because he made me feel safe. And his mother, Darlene Langford, smiled at our engagement photos and said all the right things. I'm so happy for you both. You're exactly what Caleb needs. I always prayed he'd find someone kind. But her kindness had conditions. Darlene was admired in our town. She chaired committees, funded scholarships, hosted women's circles that were really just power meetings with tea. She had the type of reputation that protected her from suspicion. People wanted to believe she was good because it made the town feel cleaner. And when someone has that kind of reputation, you can't accuse them without becoming the villain. So when she corrected my wording at family dinners, I swallowed it. When she refolded my towels after offering to help, I laughed it off. When she rearranged my kitchen cabinets while I was feeding our baby, I told myself it was harmless. Then I got pregnant with our daughter, Maya, and Darlene's smile changed. It became possessive. It was subtle at first. The way she held her hand on my belly a second too long. The way she talked to my stomach like I was just a coat hanger. My grandbaby, she'd whisper. My sweet girl. I corrected her once. Our baby, I said gently. Darlene tilted her head and smiled like I'd said something cute. Of course, honey. But after Maya was born, Darlene stopped pretending. She appeared at our house without asking, always with an excuse. A casserole, a bag of diapers, a newborn book written in that patronizing tone that assumes you don't know anything. She insisted on being in the room when Maya had checkups. She asked the nurse questions before I could. She told the pediatrician, Tessa worries a lot. Worries a lot. That phrase followed me everywhere after that. When Maya cried, Darlene would lift her from my arms like she had permission. When I reached out to take her back, Darlene would turn her body away slightly, still smiling, still calm, like I was being dramatic. She's fine with me, she'd say. See? Calm. Like calm was a prize and she'd earned it. Caleb noticed some of it, but not enough. He'd been trained his whole life to interpret his mother's control as love. She's just excited, he'd say. She helped me when I was a baby. She doesn't mean anything by it. And for a while, I let myself believe that, because the alternative was terrifying. That the most respected woman in our community was actively trying to make me look unstable inside my own home. The first time I heard Darlene say the word temporary again, like it was a family joke, Maya was 2. We were at Darlene's house, surrounded by her friends. All polished hair and soft laughter and coordinated jewelry. One of them asked Darlene how she handled modern marriages. Darlene smiled and said, Oh, you know, these days wives come and go, but mothers are permanent. Her friends laughed. Caleb laughed too because he was used to turning her barbs into harmless humor. I didn't laugh. I felt my throat tighten, and I remembered my wedding reception. That whisper, that warning. Enjoy it, dear. Nothing is permanent, not even wives. That night, I told Caleb, Your mother is making jokes about replacing me. Caleb frowned. She doesn't mean it literally. She's saying it in public, I said. And you're laughing with her. Caleb rubbed his eyes like I was exhausting him. Tess, please. Don't turn everything into conflict. Conflict. That was how Darlene stayed protected. She made sure any objection sounded like me creating drama. So I stopped objecting, and I started noticing. I noticed that Darlene always made comments when other people could hear them, but never quite loud enough to be quoted easily. I noticed she asked questions that implied something was wrong. Are you sleeping okay? Are you handling postpartum? Are you sure you're not overwhelmed? Postpartum. Maya was too, but Darlene kept using that word like a stain that never washed out. Then, a year later, Caleb's job changed. He started working under Darlene's close friend, someone she had basically placed in his path. It seemed like a gift. More money, better schedule, more security. Darlene framed it as care. I just want my son to be stable, she said. Stable. Another word she loved. What she really wanted was proximity, control, a chain around his decisions. Because after that job change, Caleb started coming home with Darlene's opinions in his mouth. Mom thinks we should move closer. Mom thinks daycare is risky. Mom thinks you're stressed. He'd say it gently, like he was trying to help. Like repeating her thoughts made them neutral. I started writing things down, not dramatically, not obsessively, just enough to keep myself sane. Dates, phrases, context. Because the scariest thing about a woman like Darlene is how quickly she can make you doubt your own reality. Then came the email. It was late. Caleb was asleep. I was on our shared laptop printing a school form. I clicked the wrong tab by accident, and his inbox was open. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't digging. I just saw a subject line that made my stomach drop. Transfer, as discussed, from Darlene. I clicked. It was short, casual, like they'd done this before. Caleb sent the amount. This will help you get settled without stress. Love you. We'll handle the rest once you're out. Out. My hands went cold. I scrolled. There was a screenshot attached. A bank transfer. Darlene's account, Caleb's account. And the memo line said, "Fresh start." I stared at that screen until my eyes burned. This wasn't Darlene offering help because her son was struggling. This was Darlene funding my husband's exit. I woke Caleb up so fast he thought something happened to Maya. "Why did your mother send you money labeled Fresh Start?" I demanded, holding the laptop like evidence. Caleb blinked at the screen, face slack with sleep, then tightened. His eyes flicked away. "It's not what you think," he said. "Then what is it?" My voice shook. Caleb sat up slowly, rubbing his face. "I didn't ask her. She offered." "For what?" I pressed. He swallowed. "For space." Space. That word again. The word people use when they want to erase you without saying divorce. "You're leaving me," I said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'm not leaving, I need time. Things have been hard." Hard? I felt like I was standing in a room I'd decorated, and suddenly the walls were gone. "You were planning this with her," I said. Caleb flinched. "No, she thinks we're toxic." Toxic. Darlene's favorite diagnosis for women who don't obey. I realized then that this wasn't a fight between me and Caleb. It was a campaign, and I had been living in it for years. Caleb didn't leave that night. He couldn't. Not with Maya asleep down the hall. Not with my hands shaking. But the next morning, he avoided my eyes. He took Maya to preschool without kissing me goodbye. And when he came back, he said the sentence that told me everything. "Mom thinks it would be best if I stay at her place for a while." I looked at him and felt something inside me go quiet. Not sadness. Decision. Okay, I said softly. Caleb looked relieved, like he'd been waiting for me to explode so he could blame me for it. I didn't explode. I smiled, and I watched him pack. Because if Darlene wanted to buy my marriage apart, she could. But she was about to learn something. You can pay someone to leave. You can't pay someone to forget what you did. And I wasn't done reading her receipts. After Caleb moved into his mother's house, everything went quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that feels staged. Darlene's house had always been a refuge for Caleb. No expectations, no accountability, no consequences. Decisions were made for him. Excuses were provided before he even asked. That was how he grew up. And now, exhausted and conflicted, he slid back into it without resistance. For me, that silence became space. 2 days after he left, the first message came from Darlene. Sweetheart, I truly believe some distance will be healthy for everyone, especially Maya. I hope you can understand. Understand. That word was her shield. She used it to make cruelty sound reasonable. I didn't respond. That afternoon, when I picked Maya up from preschool, her teacher asked if we could talk for a moment. Everything okay? She asked gently. Yes, I said. Why? She hesitated. Maya's grandmother came by yesterday. She asked about early pickup. She said you were having a difficult time. Difficult. Darlene had wasted no time turning me into a narrative. That night, after Maya was asleep, I opened the folder I'd been building for years. Texts, dates, exact phrasing. And then I noticed something I hadn't fully seen before. The money. The transfer I'd discovered wasn't the first. I pulled up our shared account history. Small amounts. Inconsistent timing. Always labeled as something harmless. Help. Support. Gift. But there was a pattern. Every transfer lined up with a decision Caleb and I had reversed. A move we didn't make. A boundary we dropped. A plan we abandoned. Darlene wasn't just interfering. She was funding compliance. And Caleb, whether consciously or not, had learned that pleasing his mother came with rewards. 3 days later, Caleb came by to pick up more clothes. He avoided my eyes, moved quickly, like someone afraid of being asked questions he didn't want to answer. Maya misses you, I said quietly. I know, he replied. Mom says this is temporary. Temporary. That word again. She also thinks Maya might be better off staying with her a few nights a week, he added carefully, just while things settle. I looked at him. Really looked. This wasn't a suggestion. This was escalation. Did you ask for that? I asked. Caleb shook his head. She brought it up. She's worried about stability. Stability, another favorite. She already tried to pull her from school, I said. Caleb froze. What? I told him what the teacher said. His face tightened, but not with anger, conflict. I'll talk to her, he said, though his tone lacked conviction. That night, I did something Darlene never expected. I called a lawyer. Her name was Andrea Mitchell, and she specialized in family law. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything, from the early comments to the money transfers to the sudden guardianship language. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. This isn't accidental, she said finally. This is grooming of your husband and potentially of your child. What's her endgame? I asked. Andrea didn't hesitate. Control, influence, and if necessary, custody leverage. The word landed like a weight. She's creating a paper trail that paints you as unstable, Andrea continued, and she's positioning herself as the solution. I swallowed. What do I do? Andrea's voice sharpened, not aggressively, but decisively. You document everything. You stop reacting emotionally, and you prepare for her next move. What's her next move? Andrea exhaled slowly. She'll push Caleb to formalize this separation, and then she'll make her concern legal. That night, I didn't cry. I planned. I pulled school records, doctor visits, attendance logs, messages where Darlene described me as anxious, overwhelmed, unreliable. And then I remembered something she had forgotten. When Maya was born, Darlene had insisted we sign a consent form allowing her to help with medical appointments in case of emergencies. She'd rushed us, framed it as convenience. I'd signed, but I'd also kept a copy. Andrea reviewed it the next morning. This, she said, tapping the page, names you as the primary decision maker, not Caleb, not her. I felt something shift inside my chest. She can't override this without exposing herself, Andrea added, and if she tries, she'll leave fingerprints everywhere. Darlene made her move a week later. Caleb called me late, voice tight. She wants me to talk to a lawyer, he said, just to understand options. Options. The word that meant war without saying it. I expected that, I said calmly. Caleb paused. You're not angry? No, I replied. I'm prepared. He didn't know what that meant. Darlene did, because 2 days after that call, I was served papers. Not divorce. Temporary guardianship, filed by Darlene, claiming emotional instability, inconsistent parenting, concern for Maya's well-being. Andrea read the filing and smiled thinly. She rushed, she said, and she got sloppy. The hearing was scheduled fast. Darlene arrived looking exactly how she wanted to be seen. Soft colors, calm voice, gentle concern. She spoke about love, about fear, about doing what was best for the child. Then Andrea spoke. She presented the timeline, the texts, the school incident, the money transfers, and finally, the consent form. The judge read it twice. Darlene's smile faded. She leaned toward her attorney, whispering urgently. The judge looked up. Ms. Langford, you signed this document acknowledging the mother's primary authority. Darlene nodded stiffly. At the time, yes. And you proceeded with this filing without notifying her? Silence. That silence was louder than any accusation. The judge dismissed the petition, but then he did something Darlene hadn't planned for. He recommended restricted contact pending review. Darlene's face went white. Outside the courtroom, she stepped close to me and hissed, "You planned this." I met her eyes. "No," I said quietly. "You underestimated me." Caleb watched the exchange, stunned. That night, he didn't go back to his mother's house. He sat at my kitchen table instead, staring at the floor. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I know," I said. But knowing didn't undo what had already been revealed. And Darlene wasn't finished. Not yet. Darlene didn't stop after court. Women like her don't stop when they lose. They stop when the price becomes public. For 2 weeks after the petition was dismissed, she switched tactics. Instead of going after me directly, she went after what held my life together: routine. Maya's school suddenly lost a permission form, one I'd already submitted. A substitute teacher told me, "Grandma called with concerns." A parent I barely knew asked me with a tilted smile if I was doing okay. Darlene was planting whispers. She couldn't take my child in court, so she tried to take my credibility in town. Caleb stayed quiet through it, the way he always did when he was torn. He told me he was setting boundaries with his mother, but boundaries meant nothing if they weren't enforced. And Darlene noticed that too. So she aimed her next move at Caleb. One night, Caleb came home pale and shaky, like he'd been holding his breath for hours.
"She showed me paperwork,"
he said.
"She wants me to sign something."
What kind of paperwork? I asked, already knowing the answer would be ugly. Caleb swallowed.
"A separation agreement. She says it's for structure. And she says if I sign, she'll help me with a down payment on a condo. A clean start."
A clean start. The memo line on the transfer. She wasn't just trying to separate us. She was trying to buy the narrative that Caleb left me because I was unstable, not because she funded his exit. Did you sign it? I asked. Caleb shook his head.
"I told her I needed time."
I stared at him. Do you understand what she's doing? Caleb's eyes glossed.
"I think so."
No, he didn't. Not yet. Because Darlene had one last weapon she hadn't used. The story of me as the threat. The next morning, I got a call from Maya's pediatric office. They'd received a request to transfer Maya's records to another clinic. The caller claimed to be family and said the mother was overwhelmed and the grandmother would handle future appointments. I asked the receptionist what name was used. She hesitated. Darlene Langford. My hands went cold. That wasn't just meddling. That was a direct attempt to establish medical control. Another paper trail move. Another way to frame me as absent. I called Andrea immediately. Andrea's voice went crisp. That's interference, and it's pattern behavior. What do we do? I asked. We stop playing defense, she said. We make the pattern expensive. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the folder I'd been building. The receipts, the messages, the transfers, the notes. Then I remembered the thing Darlene truly lived for. Not Caleb. Her image. Her legacy. Darlene chaired 2 local charities and had her name on a scholarship fund that made her look saintly. She didn't just want to be respected. She needed to be untouchable. She needed the town to treat her like a moral authority. That's why she could say cruel things and have people call it concern. So Andrea and I did the one thing Darlene never thought I'd do. We aimed at the only place her charm didn't work. Paperwork. Andrea filed a motion for protective orders based on repeated interference attempts. Along with it, we submitted a formal request for discovery of any financial incentives tied to Caleb's separation, because those payments weren't just help. They were evidence of manipulation in a custody-adjacent dispute. Caleb saw the word discovery and panicked. "She'll hate me," he whispered. I looked at him, exhausted but steady. She already hates me. The question is whether you're going to keep letting her hurt our daughter. That word, daughter, did something. Caleb's face tightened like a man waking up in the middle of a nightmare. He nodded. "Do it." Darlene's response was instant. She called Caleb screaming, real screaming, not her usual wounded whispers. He put it on speaker by accident when he tried to silence it. "You're choosing her over me?" Darlene shrieked. "After everything I've done? I gave you a future. I saved you from that woman." Saved you. There it was. The truth. I watched Caleb's expression change as he heard his mother say out loud what he'd avoided admitting. She didn't see me as a person.
She saw me as a problem to remove. Caleb ended the call. His hands shook. "She paid you," I said quietly, not as an accusation, an anchor. "She paid you to leave." Caleb stared at the floor. "I didn't think of it like that." "I know," I said. "That's why it worked." 2 days later, Darlene's attorney responded to discovery demands with a mistake. They claimed no material financial influence existed. But Darlene had already left it in writing. That email I found sent the amount, "once you're out," wasn't just personal, it was strategic. Andrea attached it to a filing, and then she did something even more devastating. She requested a court order requiring Darlene to cease contact with any third parties, school staff, medical offices, daycare providers, regarding Maya. It was a simple request. It made Darlene furious because it took away her favorite weapon, whispered influence. The judge granted it. Darlene couldn't handle being blocked quietly, so she did what controlling people always do when they feel their power slipping. She overreached. At a charity luncheon, one of her legacy events, she pulled me aside in a corner and smiled like a knife. "You're going to lose," she said softly. "This town knows who I am." I looked at her, calm. "I know who you are, too." Her smile tightened. "No one will believe you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I didn't give her the satisfaction of emotion. I said one sentence. "Then I won't ask them to believe me. I'll let them read you." Darlene's eyes flickered just once. That was fear, because deep down she understood. The one thing she couldn't control was a record. That night, Andrea filed an additional notice, something most people would overlook until it was too late. She forwarded Darlene's documented payments and charity-linked reimbursements from publicly available filings and internal board minutes Caleb had access to through his job network to the appropriate oversight channels as a request for review. Not an accusation, not a scandal headline, just a formal inquiry. Darlene had been careless. She moved money the way she moved people, assuming no one would question her. Within 10 days, the charity board called an emergency meeting. Then donors started asking questions. Then the local paper ran a small, polite article. "Scholarship fund under review after internal audit request." Small, polite, but deadly. Because Darlene didn't live for money. She lived for reputation. Caleb came home the day the article ran and found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "She's losing it," he said quietly. "She called me 15 times. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. "She tried to take Maya," I said. "This is the consequence." A week later, Darlene showed up at our house, not with casseroles, not with tissues, with rage. She pounded on the door like she'd forgotten how to be elegant. When I opened it, she stood there trembling. "You did this," she hissed. I looked at her steadily. "You did this," I replied. "I just stopped covering for you." Darlene's eyes flashed. "You ruined my life." I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "I ruined your control." She tried to step forward. Caleb appeared behind me, and for the first time in our marriage, he didn't soften for her. "Leave," he said. Darlene stared at him, stunned. "Caleb!" "Leave," he repeated, voice shaking but firm. "Or I'll call the police." Darlene's mouth opened, then closed. She looked between us, realizing something she'd never believed possible. I wasn't alone anymore. She backed away like the ground had shifted under her, and in that moment, the revenge became complete, not because she suffered, but because she finally understood the truth she'd avoided for years. She could buy a lot of things, but she couldn't buy my silence anymore. The divorce didn't happen the way she planned. Caleb and I separated, briefly, with counseling and strict boundaries. We rebuilt slowly, not perfectly, but honestly. The marriage she tried to destroy didn't turn into her victory story.
And Darlene? She didn't go to jail. This wasn't a movie. Powerful people rarely fall that cleanly. But she lost what she valued most: her pedestal, her influence, her ability to walk into rooms and be treated like authority. The board removed her until the review was complete. Donors stopped calling her. Her friends stopped posting photos with her. People still smiled politely, but the smiles were careful now, like they were dealing with someone who had finally been seen. And the best part? I didn't have to scream to make it happen. I didn't have to convince the town. I didn't have to destroy her with rumors. I just let her own paperwork do what her charm couldn't: tell the truth.